Hey, what's going on, everybody? We got a really special guest here today. It's Glenn Cook, former Hurricane linebacker, but the current assistant general manager and vice president of player personnel of the Cleveland Browns. Glenn, we're going to go through your background and go through a lot of this. I really want to find out essentially why you believe what you believe about football. So we'll go through the whole background, but good having you on. Happy holidays. I want to get your quick take. Miami, Ohio State coming up. Your thoughts on the Hurricanes, their season. And again, we'll get into a lot of stuff, your days at Miami, but just your thoughts on this team, what you've kind of seen from the Hurricanes when you've been able to take time and watch them.
And I appreciate it. I appreciate being on. It's a fun time for the Canes family. And I'm also happy that I get to talk to someone besides a Buckeye being up here in Buckeye County. It's been fun because like down south we love the banter, but my gosh, like you would have thought the folks up here have won a number of championships back to back. So it's gonna be a good game. Ohio State's really talented, a really good team. But I'm impressed by our group. Just to answer your question, like I think when you think of Miami, it's people think of us as swag and energy and celebrating, but for me, it's just that competitive edge on top of the talent, that dog mentality, just never quitting, just always having the confidence that you're going to win. I think I've seen that, from this group, down there from start to finish. You saw it last week when they played A&M. That's more what I think of the U. From even my time there. It's just when you put the four fingers up, it meant something and it means something, and it's kind of cool to see it continue on. Many years later. So excited for the game. I think it's going to be a really good game. Two really good teams. This is what college football is all about. So yeah, looking forward to it.
And I know Miami fans are obviously looking forward to it. The Ohio State program is one that's always discussed, kind of going back to that national title game and the way things worked out over 20 years ago. Glenn, it's been exciting kind of watching your journey professionally going through this, but starting, just kind of going with how things are going right now with the Browns. Obviously, tough season. It's not the season you guys would have liked, but the defense, and I know that's obviously your background. You guys are second in total defense. How you kind of processed, or and how have you kind of gone through this season? You guys have a lot of young guys, draft picks all over the place, leading passer, rusher, receiver, leading tackler. A lot of young guys with this team right now. Just how has it been, and how are you kind of processing this season?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like you want to win, right? Like we all do this, we all play it, we're all a part of it because you want to win. So I think from that standpoint, it's been tough for us, just as a team, as an org. But to your point, like I love, it's similar to what I just talked about. I love the way that the classes come in and compete, and the group of guys we drafted this year have all been early contributors, and that's the best you could ask for, just in terms of getting guys who can walk in the door and compete against the best players in the world, and not only just hold their own, but you know be considered one of the best themselves. So that's a nice foundation that we hope is being built. Just when you have one of the best players, if not the best players in the world, and Miles, and then you add the Carsons and Mason Graham and Denzel Ward playing corner, and just all the pieces that we have across the team. I think it's just continuing to stack, that level of talent and get the right guys that fit uh, for us and for the organization, just to build on that and to continue to push forward. So like I said, I always say, like, at the end of the day, it's about winning. All right, we're not just drafting players like it's fantasy football and you're collecting points. Like, you want to line up every Sunday and know that you have a team that has a really good chance to win. And so until we get that done, that's what we spend all of our time doing. And then once you get to that point, you want to continue to do it. So for us right now, we're just trying to get to that point where we have a sustainable, competitive team that year over year competes for the top trophy in the league. So that's where we are, and we'll continue to do that. Like this offseason will be really big for us, as all of them. We're a couple weeks away from getting into all-star games. We were just talking about the Senior Bowl, getting into the all-star games, the combine, really getting to know these guys on an intimate level as people, we've seen the tape and we've seen them play, but now just understanding who they are and how they think. And we'll work through that for the next, 5 months and then have to make some really hard decisions.
Sure. You touch on winning, and that kind of sparked something that I was thinking about and want to kind of go through your background, just from, your days after Miami or while at Miami, just your whole background that you've kind of went through and being a scout with the Colts and the Packers, kind of whether it's college scouting or advanced scouting, and then onto all your roles with the Browns. You touched on winning, and I'm curious, what do you feel like, what do you think it takes to win at the NFL level? What do you feel like all your experiences that you've kind of gone through, like I said, the different stops at the NFL level and kind of just your background of just kind of the way you see the game. What do you feel like it takes to win at the highest level there, as you mentioned?
Yeah, it's really hard. I've been a part of some teams that have won one game. And I've been a part of some teams that have been one play away from the Super Bowl. So I feel like I have a nice vantage point into both extremes. And ultimately, like to me, I think it's a few things. It's obviously collecting as much of the right talent as you can. Like you need talent, at every level. I think you know that. I think at every level you need talent, but also it's just about fit and how that talent fits together, what type of chemistry you build with that. And then it's a culture that can take that raw combination and compilation of talent and form it into like a team, you know? Like our sport, I think our sport is so unique, um, where you can have some really, really excellent players at different positions, but sort of if the, mixture or recipe doesn't fit together, you don't always like end up with the best team, you know? So I think it's spending a lot of energy, and at least what I've been around is that those teams have spent a lot of energy making sure they know who they are, like what's our identity, what do we want to be, how do we want to play the game, and then attack the plan and creating a plan on building that, and then just hitting execution, just executing on that plan. So it sounds simple and it feels simple sometimes, it's really hard. Like that can be a hard thing to do, but I think there's a reason why so many, of the organizations who've had some somewhat of like sustainable success have been good. I believe they've really formed a nice identity for themselves. And it didn't have to be complex all the time. It's just a very simple, this is who we are, this is how we're going to play, and this is what we need, to be that team. And then you got to go execute on that, right? So like, between the draft, free agency, and trades, or any other ways you can acquire players, those are the main three. How do we go get that talent that fits into our identity? So that's sort of how I've seen it play out and what I believe. And like I said, it's not easy, but I think it is tried and true.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not easy. I mean everybody's working so hard across the league. Everybody's trying to attain success. I mean it's not, as you mentioned, you're not just drafting players to draft players. You're not just having a team. You're not fielding a team to field a team. And look, we touched on the difficulties you guys have had this year, but before that, or including this year, you make the playoffs 2 of the last 6 years now. As you mentioned, your career going back to the days with the Packers, 3 division championships in your 4 years there. You touched on nearly making the Super Bowl. So yeah, the success that you've talked about, I'm sure you've seen the wide variety of playing with great players or working with great players and draft and things like that. Glenn, I'm curious about your draft. NFL draft is always fascinating for myself, but a lot of viewers, fans of the game. Um, is there how would you kind of process or how would you explain your NFL draft process as you're trying to all the things you're touching on, trying to find the right guys, get the right guys in the building. I know you're limited on amount of visits where you can come in when you're looking at these guys. Just what is your process and what are some key things that you've found to be important in developing all this and putting it all together again, kind of going back to your days of being a college scout or working with the advanced scout, whatever it might have been with your experience, what's kind of your process as you try to put together a good draft each year?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like the way I thought about it is that coming out of the draft or whether it's free agency or trades, whenever you're acquiring players, um, you're working back from like what's my goal in this in this journey or you know with any of these like acquisition methods, and it's acquiring the most talented player with the least amount of risk at the best quote unquote price you can. Um, and how you do that is just through having information. That's how I always say it. Like, I think sometimes the analytics thing becomes an unnecessary battle between people who are more traditional and people who are not. Like, ultimately, like all that stuff is information. Like, whether it's something quantitative, qualitative, you know, what information do I need to make the best decision at this moment, at pick 52 or at pick 64, or, in March when I'm thinking about trading for this veteran who may solve a problem that we have, or who may just be a good fit, or it's just a good opportunity for us as a team. And so I kind of work backwards. Like that's how I think about it, just working back from like, okay, what's the end goal? Is, acquire the best player I can, least amount of risk, best price. And then, you build out your process to do that. And some people have built out really good process. I've been around some awesome GMs like Ted Thompson. I had time, it's playing time to spend with him when he was a GM in Green Bay. I spent a year with Bill Polian and probably asked him a million questions to death, but just how they thought about these different things, and they built really good processes to get them to the end goal. And I've been able to steal from them and kind of understand how they approach placing value on players, placing value on certain draft picks, positional value, just all those different things that go into, okay, this is going to help me make the best decision for the team that I'm with. And have just refined that over time. Just refined that over time, So I like oftentimes it's probably annoying with some of the people I work with, but it's like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? Like, do we want to position ourselves to have more draft picks? Are we trying to get a player that fills a need that we have? Are we trying to take advantage of an opportunity that we didn't expect to come? Like, what are we trying to do here? And that helps me understand how to, for the example, like contribute to the conversation in terms of acquiring that player. But even just as I think through my own thoughts on it, it's like, all right, well, if the goal is to get the most talented player, almost agnostic of price, like this dude fits that. Like he's legit. He's one of the best corners in the league. Like let's go get him. Um, if we're trying to just hedge, some roster injuries and whatnot, okay, well, there's this P squad player who maybe helps, you know, bridge us for a couple weeks while we get healthy. He's big, long, he's fast, he can play special teams and play a few snaps on defense. Just that, just always trying to understand like what's the goal, because I think that dictates a lot of what you do. No different than anything else in life. So um, I think I hope that answers your question. But that's just a little bit of like how I go about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've heard you mention it and you're kind of touching on it there, but I've heard you say information is king. I mean, that's just kind of your philosophy. And I think that's such a great thing. It doesn't matter what job it is, but certainly the one that you're in, you're trying to soak in and trying to learn as much as possible. And I can't imagine what it's like to try to place value on some things that essentially it's hard to place value on in terms of the intangibles, all those kinds of things. I mean, essentially you try to do your homework, I'm sure, obviously to get the best product, what you think or how you think it's going to work out. Certainly. Uh, Glenn, defensively, I want to get kind of your mindset on. I've heard you kind of say this as well. That's so important to develop a deep, versatile defense. And I think that when hearing you say that, I think that goes in line, whether it's pro ball, college is the same. Just your thoughts on defense and kind of the way you see it on the defensive side of the ball. And clearly, obviously, you're working with offensive stuff as well. But just kind of want to pick your brain a little bit defensively with what we're seeing in football, whether it's
Yeah.
college or NFL.
Well, I think one, my like defensive identity probably shaped a lot from how I grew up. And this, like in Miami, we played. man coverage, not only in college, but I'm just thinking like you look around high school football, little league football, like you grow up with that like one-on-one matchup mentality. So just like that man-to-man coverage, the competitive at the line of scrimmage, attacking defenses, fast athletic linebackers. So a little bit of my like, personal flavor is just that. I think it's just the fun and the aggression and the challenge that comes with being able to say like, hey, we can line up with any offense, any receiving core, and man up and not get help and shut them down. Like that. That was also always like something awesome for me to see. Uh, Not in the secondary with the Trells and the Kelly Jennings and Maxie and those dudes, but just watching them do that week to week. The challenge of that was fun, but I also think it creates a lot of challenges for quarterbacks, who aren't pinpoint accurate. Like if you can smother receivers, mess up timing, get after the quarterback, I think it does just throw off the thinking and the comfort of the player on that, the players on that other side of the ball. And then generally, like I think you can be good running, you can be good running any defense, but I mean, you look across the NFL, the tight ends look like receivers, the receivers look like running backs. The running backs can do things that receivers can do. And so we're continuing to shift into this almost like being as positionless as possible, at the skill positions on defense, just because you have to be able to match up with different types of offenses week to week. You may face a West Coast um, wide zone offense one week where they're going to be in 21, 12, 22, may throw a little bit of 11 at you. And so like, how can you know, be built to stop the run, but also, be a solid and strong coverage team. And then you may get into another situation where there's some teams who want to just push the ball down the field, more old school air raid. Like your corner's got to be able to run, or your shell defense has to be able to like play top down and prevent like explosive plays. So I do think that's where like the versatility um, is an added like bonus, because if you can get a safety who has true coverage ability such that you don't have to take them off the field, in some of those dime situations, or you can present dime, but it's really a bigger body who's athletic enough to match up on tight ends, or if you have corners who are willing to tackle, but also can play man coverage on these bigger dudes, the DKs and the George Pickens of the world, but also can sort of like, chase down and track Tyreek. It's just the skill has increased so much on offense, and the diversity of that skill, like it comes in all type of packages. Like fast isn't just small little guys. Like fast is, you know, big dudes, and a lot of dudes can run. So I just think the more flexibility you have on defense to sort of play that game and match up. I used to always be enamored with just like how Belichick did it, in some of those years where I remember when I did my event, I was doing the advance work. We were playing him in Green Bay, and it was one of the few teams where I'm like, well, I'm not sure how I'm going to present this in the advance meeting, because like one week they're like an odd front team, playing like a true 34 look, and then another week they're they're like straight man coverage, single high, didn't bring in a nose tackle, was all four down, ran a lot of games up front, and then the next week it's like all they did was run cover two and quarters, and it would just constantly change, and you could just tell he had built it in a way that they could be fluid depending on who they were playing. It just gives you such a great advantage to have that in your toolbox as a team. And it's not gonna be perfect every year, but just like that's like the holy grail of it, when you can build a defense that can legit just match up and create problems for the offense just as much as they can create problems for you.
So it's certainly fascinating to hear you discuss your thoughts on the game, the way you see it. I'm curious, kind of, we're gonna go back a little bit, kind of curious who you are, essentially, why you are who you are, essentially. Uh, let's talk about early days, sports, football. Glenn, growing up in Miami, just your early memories of kind of growing up, and then kind of we'll get into the high school stuff, and certainly into University of Miami playing there. Just your early thoughts and kind of what do you think kind of helped shape you to how you are today?
Yeah, I mean, so I got introduced. I actually started off in baseball prior. My mom put me in t-ball probably around 5. I didn't get introduced really to football until around 9. And I think, I talked about how playing ball in South Florida shaped kind of how I think about defense. Man, the way Little League football down is down in Miami sort of probably shaped my whole football perspective. Like I played at Miami Lakes back in the day. I don't know if that's what they're still called now, but I just remember, man, like the physicality and like the intensity of a 95-pound football game was a little bit different for me, coming from T-ball when it was much slower and much more individualistic. But wouldn't trade it for the world. I think that was like the springboard to loving it, loving the contact, loving the competition, loving a lot of the challenge there's a lot of like individualistic components because like you have to challenge yourself every day to get up and to go compete, you know, in South Florida because everybody else is showing up. And so like I went from Miami Lakes and I ended up playing at Liberty City Warriors at 12, which was like a new height in terms of like, Liberty City, Gwen Cherry, some of the greats that come from those two parks and many of the parks in that league. So it just continued to just like draw me in, to like what the game of football was and what it could do just from a competitiveness and passion standpoint. Um, so that was like I would say like that was the foundation, like showing up to the park every day, knowing that every win like mattered, and every loss was devastating. Like that, it was probably looking back, it's probably a lot on a 12-year-old, but that's just us. Like that's what it is down south. Like it's like do or die, every week. And every week you're gonna play a team that's got a dude and you want to make sure you shut that dude down or he can take over the game and vice versa. You want to get the ball in your dude's hands. So um, just those early years of Little League football and honestly watching like the legend. I think I've been fortunate. I think it's probably not what you're asking specifically. But I think I've been fortunate even from like that age to watch like some legends like on a daily basis. Like I practice. I don't know if you remember the running back Nitro. He's like one of the fastest kids in South Florida at least, probably in the state. And he was like a legend as a running back. And like he was like on my team, you know. Um, Played against Sean T as a sophomore in high school, played with John Beeson all 4 years of high school. Vilma, DJ when I was a freshman were in there last year, so I'm in a linebacker room every day with them. But just seeing these individually great people see their process as football players is something I always like just think back. Like a lot of times I'll look at a player, whether I'm watching him on film or I meet him, and it's like there's like a you remind me of, or you're like the opposite of, you know? And maybe not the best or perfect process, but there is something like the greats carry a certain like DNA that is like I think because I've seen it, fortunate to like see it so much playing at Miami with a lot of great dudes. It's something that like jumps out at me where it's like like the cheesy you could play at Miami thing, jumps out. I'm just like, that dude, he would have been all right on that team. Or you hear some guys say something, and you're like, man, we would have ate you up, or they would have ate you up just with that mentality. So I think just all those different experiences from, like I said, 10, 11, 12-year-old me playing with those guys to like going to high school at Chaminade and seeing how like one of the greatest head coaches operated. And G, I think he's one of two coaches to take 3 schools to a state championship. Like just seeing that like that level of greatness and process and how he led and developed us as like young teenagers, that's just always playing in my mind. Like we haven't talked in a while, but when we talk, it's crazy how now you look back and you realize like the value, I guess I would say, to the words he was sort of putting in your mind every day. And it was almost like militaristic, you know, like militaristically preaching team and hard work and like toughness and not giving up and excellent, like perfection. Like he was, speaking of G, he was like such a perfectionist, like our shoestrings touching the line. Like as a 16-year-old, like, yo, I'm running gassers. I don't necessarily care if I touch it, but it was just like every little detail mattered. And then you get in the game and you make a mistake, and it's like that's what he's talking about, right? Like, if I would have just took the right footwork, if I would have just made my read a little bit quicker, like the little stuff like that, that's what matters. So just all those lessons is probably helped me be so me, and fortunately get to where I am because yeah, like for example with G, like I don't know if I ever told like he taught me how to watch film, like no joke. I was a sophomore and he was trying to get me to run the defense better as like the first year starter. So like every lunch, I'm going into his office and we're breaking down in high school. I don't know if if this happened in today, but we're breaking down like the next opponent together. So at first it was, it's a little bit of that I don't know if that that story where first you're teaching and then you're kind of guiding and then now they're teaching you. So at first it's like my sophomore year, he's like teaching me how to do it. So every week it's like, hey, this is what you look for, study the line split, study the footwork, look at when they line up in a certain formation, this is the play they're running. Then as a junior, like I'm calling out some stuff and then he's calling out some stuff. And then senior year, it's like by Wednesday, I have the whole team broken down. Like I'm going into a game like, yo, guys, like the ball's going here. But it was like that first training, the first level of training that he gave that put me in position to do that. And then that's probably why I love watching film. Like I've been doing it since I was like 14, 13, 14. But I mean, it was to the point my senior year, he was kicking me out. He was like, hey, you got to go back to class. I was in there for like 2 hours, just like popping in VHS tapes at that time, just like watching a whole team's like season up until that point. And then when we played them on Friday, I was like, well, I already played the game. I played this game 10 times. Like, let's get this over with. I know what you guys are about to do. But it was all like at some point it was like then we started doing like group film sessions as like seniors in high school where we were taking over his office and I'm just like, hey, so if I call this out, like this is what like it was fun. Like that stuff is fun. But I think him even doing that for me, like when I got to college, it was like, I mean, it was on another level, where it was just, I did feel like a coach because he had taught us how to do it. So I wasn't worried about like what our defense was. I was not worried about like how much of the other team's offense I could figure out before we played them the next week. So yeah, that was I would say like those just as some examples, like those things are what kind of have helped me be me.
Yeah, and you've always just knowing you've over the years, just Mark Wendell. I mean, you've always spoken so highly of him, and certainly while you were at UM, you did. And so to hear that story
Yeah.
again, Glenn, what's interesting though, you're telling these stories, and the job and the role you have now with your career, you can certainly look back and be like, okay, this kind of helped shape you into these things. But it's so fascinating because that I assume this was not essentially your goal was to be the best player you could be at that time, right? I mean, and then you go to Miami, you weren't a highly regarded recruit, but you did have other options. You could have went other places. I know you visited other schools, right? But just how did kind of everything kind of transpire with how things kind of continue to move along with your knowledge of the game and essentially wanting to soak all this in, your love of the game of this part of it. There's all the other stuff that you were enjoying at the time. You touched on the aggressiveness that you like, the competitiveness that was going on in South Florida. It still is like that. But just kind of when you think back on it, how did that knowledge or the love of the game of to really dissect all of this? Where do you how do you think that kind of
I didn't know what to call
evolved?
it. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, but like I didn't know what to call it. But I remember I was maybe 12, 11 or 12 at my grandmother's house, and like I would take little packs of like Topps cards, and get like we would buy random packs, and I would say, okay, what's the best 11 on each side I could build? So like I was always interested in it, but I just didn't know to call like it being a general manager. I didn't know that's what the position called was called. I knew it was franchise mode on Madden. Like that's what I knew it as. And I probably wasn't looking at the fine print in terms of who was in charge. So there was always like probably that like spark in the back of my mind that I would do it. And then like as I got older, you know, and got closer to your point, like I wasn't a great player at Miami. I'm sure the fans would
Well,
say that.
listen, I know we've talked about it, but you led the team in tackles in '08.
I did.
Your last year there, you worked your way into to being
Well,
certainly a very reliable player. And coming
I'm
off the
definitely
injury in
looking back,
'07,
like now that I do what I do now, I definitely gonna look back and be like, yeah, that wasn't great, like that is. But anyways, like, so as I got
there's
closer,
certainly better. Look, you played with 12 first rounders over your time. There were certainly better
yeah,
players, but trust me, there were definitely worse players too.
no, that's fair. But as I got close to like the end of that time, it was like I knew it was like I was either gonna go the agent route or like the GM route. Like I think you probably maybe recognize like a lot of the coaches at Miami were pushing me to coach, probably because of some of the things I was just talking about, and that part came natural. But I just didn't find the joy in that. Even my junior was it my redshirt junior year, I traveled with the team, sat in coaches' meetings. Like I was in it, even while I was still like a player and a part of the game plan and all that stuff. I remember Shannon let me call one drive in the UNC game that year. It was like a 3-and-out, and I blitzed like 2 out of the 3, like just snap. Like I was like, yo, I think they had scored on the first 3 drives against us, so I was like, well, I gotta do something different. So I just went out. But anyways, like, so they were like, I think there was that drive that push me towards coaching, but I kind of probably knew deep down that it was like either you know be on the agent side because that part was interesting, but the personal side was also just like always there. And so like as I met more scouts and realized what the job was, um, I'll never forget Michael Barrow, who's my position coach. He was like, "Okay, are you sure this is what you want to do? Like, we gotta sprint full speed at it." And so he was like amazing. He helped me put a plan together just in terms of, okay, like let's step back and identify what you want out of this. Like, where do you want to work? Why do you want to work? He really made me think through probably more like second and third level job career stuff because most people are like, oh, I want to get in the league, I want to go to the NFL. But he was like, hey, let's be intentional about where you want to go, what you want to learn, like why are you doing this? You're doing this because you want to be somewhere great and also like develop in the career such that you can be a GM one day. Okay, like where is that at? And so um when I went through that process and exercise, I was like, man, this is for sure it. I would love to work like, a couple of these different places. There are some at the time in some of the organizations that are still functioning at a really high level at the time. I mean, now, but at the time it was like, okay, these are some of the best orgs, some of the best GMs, people who are well respected. Uh, let's reach out and connect. And I felt like Indy was one of those teams, and I just was fortunate that just through circumstances I got connected. Um, and got an interview there and was fortunate to get like an entry level job. And that's where I started out in the league in my first year. So
Yeah, it is interesting here you talk about because again, the coaching. I know you did the GA. You were helping out for a little bit around the program, and then you do the GA stuff for a little bit before you switch it to pro. I would before we kind of get into those early days too. UM stuff. I know you joked about it, but your time at UM, how would you kind of sum it up? Like the great players you played with, people are always fascinated to hear. Obviously, your connection with Beeson and all the success he had, and kind of you guys going through a lot of stages together, of your career. I touched on as throughout your career, you played with the 12 first rounders. You got to see what those legends were like and kind of how their process. I'm sure that's helped shape you, help your football mind even today, seeing some of those guys firsthand, what they kind of went through. Any memories, Glenn, that stand out to you? Anything from Sean? And Sean Taylor's obviously a guy that everybody always asks about all the great stuff he was did as a player. You guys were teammates that first year when you were a freshman. Just any memories that really stand out to you that you like talking about and thinking about at UM?
Um, no, I mean, there's all type of there's story. I try to be careful with like the stories I share because I think that's what makes it fun that we as like guys experience it and it stays in the locker room or it stays on Green Tree. But I think like so one of the, like in my job, right? Like a lot of times you can get caught up and enamored on like talent, right? Like it's just talent, talent, talent. This kid's he's big, he's fast, he can run, he can jump, he makes a few splash plays, he can catch, he can chase down guys. Like, you just get caught up on that. And you can forget like the value and importance of like how the person is wired and what makes us tick and what makes us go and what's going to keep us going when we get paid or keep us going when we get hurt or help us push through uh, the walls of adversity that are going to eventually come, whether it's through like success or failure. And I think probably for me, my time at UM helped me realize that piece of it where it was like, yeah, these dudes are supremely talented. Like, let's not get that twisted. But the way they were wired was like something I'd never seen to that magnitude. Like Beeson, like John, I remember seeing John like pull sleds and we would do it together, but I not to his level, but like pull sleds after 3 hour practice. Like he put, you know, 2, 3, 40-pound plates on a single man's like sled and just pull it up and down the field. I mean 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Like, but like then you 20x that when you get to Green Tree, like in my early years, just like Vilma, DJ, like those dudes were not only some of the most supremely talented people on the planet, but there was also this like drive and work ethic that it's even now still there. Like I talked to JV, maybe like once a month and we'll catch up on different things. And like he attacks everything like that. Like that is just him, like he just attacks whatever he's at, whatever he's doing, he's gonna be the best. And then you also see, being in a program like Miami, we're gonna get some 5 stars where you're like, this is the laziest player I've ever been around, you know, or he's not gonna maximize his talent because he didn't have the like drive or he didn't have the grit. He didn't have like the fortitude to like push through the challenge or he's never been in such a competitive environment where he had to actually like compete for a spot and you realize like oh shoot that foundation that could have been built wasn't built and why wasn't it so like maybe I was thinking about that kind of stuff too much as like a 20-year-old as a teammate but I would see it, like, and I was just, and I think that those things are what I don't have a specific story because it's not, I don't want to praise anyone too much or put anyone out there, but I think it's just like that experience of seeing not only like the physical excellence, but then also that like internal excellence of when guys came in the weight room and worked out on their own. When you see guys doing modalities, treatment stuff on the practice field, forming workout stuff, um, working on little. I remember Reggie would come back in the summer and like, I would say he's probably been in the league at least 7 years. I'm throwing out a number, probably more. And he would be doing the most basic receiver drills, like time after time by himself, like just basic receiver drills. Like nothing fancy, like not some of this fluffy stuff we see now, but just like real foundational conceptual like receiver stuff just over and over. And I would watch it and part of me would be like, dude, you're like one of the top guys in the league. You're playing for one of the best franchises. And the other part of me is like, yeah, this makes sense. Like this is why he is who he is, because it's just like those like hidden hours that he's putting in that nobody's seeing, like in the sand pit, doing receiver drills or with Swayze, just like working, like just working at his craft. And so it's like now I'm trying to like to me and like my job, I'm trying to find that out, right? Like how can I figure out because everyone now like has a trainer, everyone has someone they work with, everyone has a coach, has a footwork guy, a strength guy. But like, how do you find out like those nuggets in terms of who they are? A little bit like who they are when nobody's watching or when nobody important is watching, like it's not for TV, YouTube, or to be sent to a coach. Like, what are you actually doing? And what's driving you to do that like constantly and on a day to day. Um, so yeah, that would be more like those. I have a lot of those memories, like a lot of those memories. I like the summer thing was probably my first year, even before we started. It was a little bit like, oh, this just got real because like I would I think John and I went out there to work out one time like on a weekend in like July the year before we started, and you show up and it's like Reggie's doing 7 on, Edge doing 7 on, Vilma, Dre is, going up against Trail. Like it's like a real pro 7 on 7. And it's some of the like current Miami guys partaking in it too. I was like, oh yeah, this is where like, iron sharpens iron type of thing. Um, that's when it was like real. But I just think like just so many of those little stories. And I feel lucky because it's just like I don't you can't draw it up to be around that kind of like greatness. Um, like you said, 12 first rounders and just like a number of second and third rounders as well, and guys who played a lot of time, a long time in the league. But um, I think it's just that experience always sticks with me, just in terms of how I think about at least the type of guys that I want. That's, and I think no matter, it's not only like a Miami thing. I think we take ownership of that, but I just think it's just a football thing when you can. I always like think about like probably our best team in Green Bay and probably one of our best teams in Cleveland. It's just like you don't really know what's happening. I think people can probably like be fooled to think like, oh yeah, I built like they built this team, and like sometimes you don't know what's happening until you're like in it, and then it's like almost an experience because you're like you start to get the inkling of like, man, this team could be, like we could be legit. The same thing with high school. Like my best high school team, you remember, like my senior year. It's like we thought and we wanted it to be that, but it's like you get like to week 8, and you're like, oh, this could. Then you're like riding that like high of like the experience, and I think that's the thing. It's just like giving yourself a shot at that. You don't know, but like you bring all these great pieces together, and it fits really tightly, and it's just like you can't stop it. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting.
I
Just
was gonna
hearing you
say
talk about the summer stuff, Glenn, all that stuff. When you touch on Reggie, I just thrown in and reminded me of just Ed Reed coming back. He'd been in the league a few years, and I remember the stories of him on the jugs machine, and sure, just relentless of that. And that's when he goes out, and the next year he gets the Defensive Player of the Year. So just that just hearing you explain it's so true. Obviously, you've seen it. Just that relentless pursuit and just making it isn't good enough for those guys that you're touching on. That extra effort stuff. To combining the elite athleticism with it take them. And Glenn, it just I can just on my role when I watch recruits or whatever it might be on lower level development and just kind of watching guys, and you kind of just feel like it takes a lot of the other stuff. It takes all the intangibles. It's not just who can run the fastest or jump the highest kind of thing. That mentality, and you touched on it, and we're seeing this as you mentioned around college football. It's not just uh, what you're going to do when you get there, or what how are you going to kind of separate yourself from the pack, and kind of your background, and how you're going to kind of keep emerging and keep it moving. You can't just settle for what you've already accomplished, or you're going to get passed up. And we see that, and it goes fast. And certainly the college level, you probably feel that
that's
way
quick.
too.
Yeah,
These guys, if you don't maximize it,
yeah.
it's very difficult for sure.
I remember like one of the things I learned from like when I got drafted in baseball. It was like a different version of what we're talking about, but I was only there a year, but you started to see sort of like these guys who had always probably always been good their entire career, and you get into the farm system, and at this point, no matter where you're picked first or really, I won't say not first, because the first round pick probably got treated a little bit different. No matter if you're picked third round to 50th round, um, if you go up to bat, like the pitcher doesn't care. Like he's not gonna throw 92 to the third rounder and throw 95 to the 46 rounder. Like everybody's getting 95. And so um, that first hint of, a slump for the young kid who's been the best baseball player his whole time. You I'm these teams don't know how that player is going to react. Like the club doesn't know how he's going to react, and you've invested a lot into him in hopes that like in 5 years, 6 years, he's going to be a core part of like your everyday baseball club. And like I would be, we sit in a hotel and you would go back and just it's like an 18-year-old in his head because he can't make good contact on the baseball, you know? Like it just is like the first time where he like faced this challenge. He's like hitting, 3 of 15 over his last like 20 at bats. And he doesn't know what to do. Like, how do you like, it used to make me think like, how do you assess as like a scout, like who's prepared to handle that? And now I have friends who are in baseball and that's definitely a thing that they think about, but it's like, how do you assess like who has the right makeup such that when you go to, because you're gonna go through it. Like I remember, I want to say Mike Trout was coming out that same year, and he had to like, like his first, you know, stint in the minors was not like great after he got past rookie ball, but it's like he was the first pick. Like how do you know that this player is prepared to? And I could be wrong, or maybe when he got in the minors, but nonetheless, like how do you know if they're built to handle this? And sometimes you don't, so you gotta have the right, you gotta say over time, like these attributes will get me in the right direction. Like, if a guy has resolve and there's examples of him, pushing through different things and the way he thinks about the game is the right way, it just gives you a shot, and you still gotta support them when they're a part of your organization. But it's hard, like because of what you said, like because of the neck up. Um, it's just like I won't name names. I played with some dudes who first round talent, but mentally couldn't get out of their own way, and it was like debilitating. And they got drafted late or didn't get drafted at all, and it legit had nothing to do with their physical ability. Like truly, it was just a psychological game that they just could not win at. And we're all human. We're all humans at the end of the day. We're not playing with robots. So how do you one assess where they are and see if you can get them to that point, or you know figure out if you should stay away? So that's the challenge. It's like it's totally different.
You touched on it, you're getting drafted, and I don't want you just to skim over. I want you to go back a little bit. You finished up at UM with football. You get drafted there by the Chicago Cubs in baseball. Can you kind of just explain that process, what that was like? You touched on going to the rookie ball there in the Arizona League. Yes, Mike Trout was a 17-year-old playing in that league. I was looking at some of your teammates. You had some guys make it. Not some. I don't know if you remember everybody, but or a guy like DJ LeMahieu played 3 games with your
Yeah,
squad
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Justin Boers, a former Marlin who was on the team. Giovanni Soto played 1 game, but he played 800 in the majors nearly. So, but just Glenn, walk me through it. You get drafted. It had to have been unexpected at a certain level. Can you kind of explain it? And then you did touch on how some of that has kind of applied a little
yeah.
bit, just that experience to now. But just what was that like? What
Yeah, I
do
mean,
you kind of
I
remember
going
about it
into
all?
going into it, I actually did know I was getting drafted, but leading me up to it was crazy. Like, I get a call maybe a couple weeks after the draft. Now that I know how the NFL process works, like the draft's completed, and then you kind of have like rookie ball. I don't get it, not rookie ball, rookie mini camp. I don't get an invite to that, and so I'm sure the scout who was tracking me, he reached out and was like, "Hey, I scouted you when you were in high school. You still think you want to do it?" Now, mind you, I had not played at Miami. Miami kind of sort of pulled the rug from underneath me in terms of being a two-sport athlete when I got there, which is it is what it is. Focus on football was the message. Short and sweet, and that's what I did. So I had not played, but I was like, you know what, I'm not doing anything else. I'm not going to sit at home. Not ready to get into the quote unquote real world just yet. So I went to at the time he was a Cub Scout. I went to his house. He had a batting cage, and he was like, "Well, I'll bring you to the workout, but you can't embarrass me." So he wanted to make sure I could still function. And so for 2 days, from about 10 to 4 o'clock, I was at his house, fielding, throwing, hitting, taking breaks. We'd go eat lunch, come back, take some more BP. He'd have me hit opposite. Just like taking me through the ringer of what would have honestly, I didn't think about this, but it ended up being the workout or part of the workout. Um, and I guess I made him comfortable enough because it was a preferred workout the Cubs were having in Clearwater, Florida. Um, drove up the night before, got up at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. It was about like 30 or 40 guys who were, I think, would have ended up being drafted, and had like a crazy workout. Like you would have never known, and I wasn't expecting to do that well, but you would have never known that I hadn't played organized baseball in like 5 years. And so they pulled me to the side. I was like, "Hey, we're gonna draft you on the last day. Don't know where, but just kind of keep your phone on you." And so, of course, I didn't. Like, I had the draft up on my laptop, but I'm like outside. My mom's calling me.
No
You
draft
know,
party. No draft party.
no draft party. My mom's calling me. The scouts calling me. Man, I forget his name. I think it was Mr. Pena, something like that. Forgive me if you're listening to this. Uh, and finally, like, gets a hold of me, and he was like, "Hey, what do you think about 3K and coming out to Mesa?" I was like, "Well, I didn't think I'd get a signing bonus, so 3K does it for me." So I got 3 grand, yeah, and got signed a rookie ball, and went out for what was about 7, 8 months and competed my butt off. Just could not hit the off speed stuff. Like fastball, I still probably could touch it pretty well, make good contact, but just any type of off speed was crazy. But to your point, like it was just another, it's probably just another like nugget of development that was informal in terms of um like player evaluation, but I was just doing it as a player. So just me, like I'm one of those dudes who I observe everything. So I was observing my teammates and just how they worked. And the 10th round pick who was a 4 year player in college, the 6th round pick who was a 18-year-old straight out of high school, the 20th round Australian pitcher, like all these different just types of backgrounds and people all on one team. Now, this is again much more individualistic, but still requires like some sort of team development, even to help your own personal development. Um, but just like understanding what was driving guys, right? Like some guys had big signing bonuses and they were spending a lot of money because they never had this much money before in Mesa, Arizona, which I don't know hindsight how you could do that, but buying new cars and taking people out, and then you had some of us who were getting like just the $300 a week, to eat Subway or whatever we could afford, and you had like our schedule was 4 days on, 1 day off, 4 days on, 1 day off, and you did that for 6 months straight. And so just like you got to have a different mindset and also on those days on and off, you're still working out. So you're playing 9 innings or 7 innings, working out in the morning, taking BP. Like it's a grind. And I think I don't know who came up with the system, but it probably is somewhat intentional to sort of weed out the people who could just handle that that grind that comes with baseball. And that's why people say it's so much more mental because I mean, I hit 12 times over that span, maybe 10 times, like 10 at bats across like 3 games or 4 games that were 3 hours a game. It just takes a lot of like mental toughness to stay focused and and be ready to execute. You know, you get up to bat and you get maybe a couple shots at like making good contact. So I just took all those. I just always think about that, like just all those different lessons, because like regardless of the sport to some degree, uh, the archetypes are the same, right? Like you have the really talented player who doesn't work hard, or somewhat the underachiever who's like maxed out who he is because of his grind and his toughness. Um, the late bloomers or the people who maxed out quickly. Just like it doesn't matter what the sport is, you have a little bit of that across all of them that are similar, like across the different sports disciplines that you can take some lessons from. Um, the guys who can take coaching and apply it quickly versus the ones who can't. Some people who need to be coached or given feedback differently than other guys. Just all those different little lessons just stick with me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I just think about it, just that everything you've kind of gone through, it's really shaped you into who you are. All your experience, I'm sure you feel the same way of whether it was, as you mentioned, just going all the way back to Little League, coming up, playing T-ball in Miami, and then the baseball stuff that you're talking about here. It's such a unique experience. I'm sure you're glad you had for a summer there, and just your 6 years at UM, battling through injury, becoming a leading tackler there, calling some plays in real games. Is a fascinating story as well. And
I don't
seeing
think
it,
many people
Glenn.
know that. No, not many people know that story. So
No, it's not a spring game. It's not just just to do it, and that's not a story that I mean. I don't know who else has a story like that. This isn't. That's not a common thing. Um, but yeah, it's just fascinating, and I'm sure you feel everything that you've kind of gone through, and kind of as I talked at the very beginning. Essentially why you believe what you believe about football, and kind of how everything's kind of shaped you. It's been fascinating hearing your story here. But yeah, I appreciate you taking time, Glenn. Your time is valuable. Hopefully, you have a happy new year, and we'll chat soon here.
you two go Canes, man. I need to get the red and what do they call it? Red and gray or silver. I need to get them off.
Scarlet.
Scarlet? Sorry, Scarlet. See, that's Scarlet.
But I don't,
Scarlet and
yeah,
Gray. You are correct. I need to get them off my back because it's been rough up here. So hopefully we have a good showing next Wednesday.
sure. All right, man. I'll take care.
All right, later.